Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Accendo Reliability webinar series. My name is Chris Jackson. If you haven't met me, you can check out who I am on accendoreliability.com. So today's webinar is entitled Reliability Analysis. Now what? And the reason why we called it this, the reason why this webinar has this title is because we received a ton of feedback or perhaps a ton of frustration from a bunch of listeners and viewers in regard to using reliability analysis to go and inform a decision, how managers were looking for something more than what we thought we were able to provide them. So today we're going to look at how we can use at least one example of reliability data analysis to inform a real life business decision. So full disclosure, we're going to nerd it up just a little bit today. The reason why is because although there's a ton of commercial software applications out there which purport to do reliability stuff, and they do, they really are somewhat limited in terms of taking the outputs of that data analysis and turning it into meaningful metrics. How much money will we save? How much will things cost? What will my warranty period need to be for us to have a better than average chance of making money on this particular product line, for example? So we have to do something a little bit above and beyond what commercial software can typically do for you. And the reason why commercial software can't easily do some of this stuff is because everyone's business situation is different. Everyone has a different relationship between value, how your organization works, and the reliability or availability or maintainability or whatever matters of the thing that your system creates. So we will have a little bit of nerding it up where we go a little bit beyond what commercial software can do. But my promise to you is that when we do nerd it up, it's going to be a couple of basic little scenarios, basic little examples, which you can type easily yourself into whatever software system you might have on hand, should you have access to some of these mathematically inclined software packages, or if you know someone who can. So even though we are going to nerd it up just a little bit, what we're going to do is so simple that with a little bit of understanding and awareness, you should be able to go and do this yourself. So before we get into reliability analysis, now what? We're going to wind back and look at what most reliability data analysis activities actually look like. And we typically start this thing called probability plotting. So we're going to do a little bit of revision or cover a little bit of content from another webinar we've done on probability plotting, where we go into greater detail about how this works. But for today's conversation, we need to understand what probability plotting is all about, just to be able to give context to the problem we're trying to solve. So as we all know, failure is a random process because there's tons of uncertainties in the way our equipment operates, material imperfections, manufacturing variation, and of course how our users use and abuse our systems. So failure is a random process, which means if this arrow at the bottom of our screen represents times of failure, then these blue dots could represent the time to failure for a seemingly identical system like an engine. This could be the time to failure for a V8 engine. It just so happens there's 20 different V8 engines used in different applications, and lo and behold, they all experience different times to failure because failure is a random process. So let's add a ton more data points just to flesh out the information we have in our example. And now we have what could be field data for an entire fleet of engines, for example, or wireless modem routers, or coalface shearers, or whatever it is that your organization's interested in. Now you can see straight away that these data points tend to cluster around this sort of region here. So we can see that straight away. We can see this sort of clustering of these data points, which means that they are more our system is more likely to fail once its use has reached this particular region of time. All right, so what's next? Well, we might want to have a bit more of a better look at the density of failure. So we want to understand how likely it is our engine is going to fail, or our wireless modem wireless modem router is going to fail within this region of seemingly high failure density. And a histogram is a good way of getting a really quick first look at the regions of high density. So we can see that this histogram clearly shows to us that failure tends to occur around a certain central location for this particular system. But this histogram is not particularly smooth. It's a bit jagged. It looks like a witch's smile. So this of itself is not particularly useful. Now, if we were trying to work out if this data was described by a normal distribution whose PDF shadow you can see on the screen right now, or a Weibull distribution whose PDF shadow you can also see on the screen right now, it is difficult to see which one is a better fit just by comparing these close to bell curves shapes to our histogram, these different columns with different heights. So when it comes to data analysis or reliability data analysis, what we typically do is approach it in a different way. We label our data points from the smallest to the largest. So data point number 1 represents the time to failure for our engine that failed first. Data point 100 represents the time to failure for our engine that failed last, because we have 100 data points in our field data or our test or whatever data source we got this information from. And a much better way to visualize the random nature of these data points when compared at least to a histogram is to create this curve here where our y-axis is the cumulative distribution function, which represents essentially the percentage of things you would expect to fail before a particular point in time. So you can see straight away that our difficult to interpret clustering of data points is now creating a much smoother curve. So we often try and represent data in the CDF space because it gives us a much smoother line where we can more easily identify trends, identify lines of best fit, for example. So here are the corresponding CDF shapes for our normal and Weibull distribution. And you'd be forgiven if you can't easily see a distinction between the two of them because they're very, very close to each other. And they both appear to be good fits to this CDF curve that we've generated based on our data. Okay, so this is often the first rudimentary step of reliability data analysis. We create this CDF curve, and the CDF curve, which is nice and smooth, we can often fit a line of best fit to it. This is something we did a lot in our very early statistical lessons within schools and universities and so forth. Okay, but there's something else we can do too to really help us. What we can do is, instead of plotting these data points on a set of CDF axes, we can create this weird set of axes which has this really weird scale on the y and vertical and horizontal axes. And the reason we want to do this is because this particular set of axes is generated based on a particular probability distribution. So you can see on the vertical axis over here, we have this really weird scale. It's still the CDF, which represents the probability that our thing has failed, or the percentage of things we expect to fail at a particular point in time. But it's not uniform. You can see it's really dense around the 50% mark, and it really starts to spread out the closer to 0 or the closer to 100% we get. And obviously it goes from 0 to 100%. The scale is somewhat infinite. On the horizontal axis, our time to failure is now in the logarithmic scale. And the reason we do this, the reason we create this weird set of axes is because if our data follows a straight line, it suggests that the data or the underlying random process is described by the Weibull distribution, because this set of axes was generated using statistical magic and witchcraft, emanating from the Weibull distribution. So this is what probability plotting is essentially all about. We create these papers, or these axes, which have these weird scales that some boffin, some professor has worked out previously, based on a particular probability distribution, so that if our data, when we plot it, creates a straight line, we can conclude with reasonable confidence that the Weibull distribution the normal distribution or whatever distribution that paper or axis is based on is a good or a candidate model for our random process. So to be clear, we should conclude that the Weibull distribution is a candidate model. We shouldn't say with absolute certainty it is the correct or true model, because there's still some variation in our data points for obvious reasons, failures of random process. So we have a promising lead here that by plotting this data on this set of Weibull axes, so on this Weibull probability plotting paper, and we see the straight line, that the Weibull distribution is a really useful one to examine further. Now, if this is something that interests you or you need to learn more about it, please check out our probability plotting webinar, which is the recording is on assendoreliability.com, where we go into this in greater detail. We don't have a ton of time to go through it today because we're going to look at how we use probability plotting to make our life better. But this is an example of Weibull distribution plotting paper with these weird set of axes, and it is almost the preeminent way we do data analysis. So just a very quick question. I just want to see the extent to which our audience has or has not conducted probability plotting either by hand or on a computer in their line of work when it comes to reliability data analysis. So we got one saying we've done both by hand and using software. Thank you, Mark. Both again from Paul. So a couple of bits of feedback where we've got software as well. Nice. Some good answers there. User work several times for the maintenance environment, which is also a really good place to, a really good area to understand random stuff, including maintenance durations, things like that. Mark, roger that. And we have some people who say we don't do a ton of it. Okay, all right, so thank you for that feedback. At least we have a mixture of experiences out there when it comes to probability plotting. Now, probability plotting is also really useful because it helps us human beings actually see what's going on. And the best way to understand probability plotting is to actually do it by hand. If you haven't done it by hand, I really suggest you try and do it because it really reinforces the underlying principles of probability plotting. But we often just use software when it comes, oh, what just happened? Oh, the presentation just cancelled itself. Can I confirm? Can I get someone to just confirm they can now see the screen with the Weibull distribution plotting paper on it? Fantastic. Sorry for that. IT, it's a wonderful thing. All right. So we often just simply use software because it can be tedious to do probability plotting by hand. Notwithstanding, it's a really good learning tool. We don't really want to do it all the time. So we often get software to automatically create a beautiful set of axes, which has our Weibull probability plotting paper on it. We get that software to put our data points on it and give us our line of best fit, and we can do it really quickly, which is obviously good because we're under a lot of time pressure as reliability engineers or engineers more broadly. Okay, so don't forget that in this plotting paper, our vertical axis is the probability of failure, or the expected fraction of things the expected fraction of things we expect should see. Sorry, the expected fraction of our fleet that has failed by a given point in time. So this is what people often look at when we say reliability data analysis. This probability plot. Put data on a plot, draw a line through it, and then work out some reliability characteristics from this line of best fit. But the problem for most reliability engineers, or at least some I should say, is that when we do this without doing anything else, we are missing something huge, which is the decision we are trying to inform by doing the data analysis, because that is everything. So why are we doing this? Is it to help us work out what my warranty period should be? Is it to work out how many warranty actions I will have? Is it to work out my mission reliability? which decision is your reliability data analysis going to inform. And there are clearly a ton more than these three things. So what we're going to look at today is a really simple warranty actions decision. How many warranty actions will I have for a given warranty period? This is really important to know for obvious reasons, and it can help you work out if your warranty period is right. But hopefully you can see how this decision can be easily changed to suit your organization, and hopefully follow the bouncing ball as I move through today's webinar. So if my boss, if my CEO, if my director, if the lead engineer, whoever the person is who's in charge of our new product line, if they're trying to work out how long the warranty period should be based on whatever it is we've done, they might ask us, how many warranty actions will I have, or which is actually there to inform a higher level question, which is, will I make a profit? So sometimes we as reliability engineers need to go beyond the specific question that's being asked, because that makes us more useful. And if we're more useful in the eyes of our decision makers, we get listened to a lot more. So in this case, let's say our boss has said, how many warranty actions will I have for this new wireless modem router we're manufacturing? But you dive a little bit deeper and you understand the boss wants to know if you're going to make a profit based on the current reliability predictions. That is a more useful question to answer, more useful question to inform. So if we go back to software and we go back to whatever it is we just looked at, the data on the screen, you'll often have a probability plot which your computer will spit back at you, which has things like the rho value, the likelihood, and the p-value, which are all different expressions for what we call goodness of fit. So question for you guys, what does goodness of fit mean to you when we're doing this sort of stuff? We use goodness of fit a lot in probability and statistics. What does it mean in your own words or in your own experience for the stuff you guys do? Give me a good chance to get some water into me. What does goodness of fit mean? Especially you guys have used software probability plotting, software-based probability plotting in the past. So how well the model represents the data, how well the model describes the data, means how accurate is my model in the first place. Some really good answers, correlation between the model and the data. Fantastic. You're all really nailing what goodness of fit is in terms of the rho values, the likelihood, and the p-values. Now, to be clear, the goodness of fit is a really useful way of understanding if we're using the right model. Obviously, using the right model is a very useful characteristic of data analysis. But when it comes to answering a question, does it really help us? So for example, here's this weird looking orange line, this curvy line over on the left-hand side of our, sorry, not the left-hand side, superimposed on our straight, magnificent red line through our data points. Now, this curvy line will have a rho value, a likelihood, a p-value, and a lot of these statistics, for example, the p-value, it essentially allows you to work out the probability that one line is the right fit versus the other line. So there are a couple of problems with these goodness of fit metrics. They're really based on hypothesis testing. So the hypothesis number, your hypothesis might be the red line is the appropriate model we should be using for our data, and we look at the p-value sort of represents the probability that another or a different model is correct. But even then, you have to, you can't just say the model is not correct. You need to almost specify another model to be able to compare the two. So goodness of fit is often really useful for comparing two lines of best fit. The problem with the goodness of fit, though, is they'll give you numbers. The rho value, for example, if it's closer to an absolute value of 1, that's a really good thing. It means your line is a really good match to your data. But how do you use that number to go and answer your question or inform the decision, because this is all about uncertainty as well. This is all about trying to give your boss the best answer. But because we're dealing with failure, and because when we investigate failure, there's always uncertainty on what we infer from our failure, we need to give these things called confidence bounds. How does your p-value help? Anyway, so let's hold that question and go back to our wireless modem router problem. And just so you know, that probability plot that we looked at represents what we understand in terms of the reliability characteristics of a wireless modem router we are going to sell. Now, the recommended retail price of our wireless modem router is $125. We make $10 profit per unit. And if it does fail during the warranty period, what we do is we just ship a new wireless modem router to our customer, and that costs a total of $115. So we now are starting to incorporate the raw numbers, the costs and the outlays and the recommended retail prices to help use reliability to answer our boss's question, which is really how much profit will I make when I take into consideration warranty. So for example, if our warranty period is 2 years, we can look at our reliable probability plot. We have our line of best fit going through what could be test data or field data. And what we can easily do is where our warranty period is indicated on the horizontal axis, we draw a line straight up to our line of best fit, go straight across, and it says, hey, 8% of our units will fail in the warranty period. But you can see that this is based off the line of best fit. There's actually quite a few local data points which aren't really close to that line. So even though this might be the line of best fit, how confident are we that this is the best, the right answer? Well, let's just assume that we're going to run with our line of best fit 8% estimate of warranty failure. So we reckon in this case that based on our line of best fit, 8% of our things will fail after 2 years using our probability plot. Now, we know that warranty costs $115 per action. So 8% times 115 gives us a cost of $9.20, which means that we would expect to have to pay $9.20 per unit when we sell these things. Now remember that we are making a unit profit of $10. So using our best guess, we are making a profit of 80 cents per wireless modem router using our best guess with the line of best fit, which would be an alarming statistic for our boss, because 80 cents profit for a device that costs $125 is not a lot. And also, are we absolutely sure that that is the right figure? Because that line of best fit is simply the line of best fit. It is not the line, so to speak. So for those of us who use software, you might go back and instead of looking at the line of best fit, we can see that there's a ton of variation at the lower level and say, you know what, let's get our software to put confidence bounds on our line of best fit. So we go back to our warranty period and we see that for this confidence region, which represents a region within which we are 90% confident that the true line runs through, more correctly, the region where the software is 90% confident that the true line runs through, we can see that the upper and lower bound on our failure probability in our warranty period is 4.2 and 17% respectively. So based on this, we are saying that we're 90% certain that between 4.2 and 17% of our units will fail in the warranty period. So we go back to our math. So, okay, the expected warranty cost is 4.2 to 17% of $115, which is $4.83 to $19 per unit. Remember, we are making a per unit profit of $10. So this means that we'd expect a net profit of somewhere between minus $9.55 and plus $5.17, and we're 90% confident it's somewhere in that range. Again, is that useful information? It is not necessarily wrong, but how does it help the decision maker? So this is where we are going to nerd it up a little bit. So just hold on to your social circles and just bear with me for a little bit, because I'm going to show you what you can do using something like MATLAB. And this is not that challenging. This is something you can really easily learn yourself through MATLAB. Sometimes even Excel can do this sort of stuff for you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first take my test data, my wireless modem router, and I'm going to enter all these times to failure observed from my test data, my field data, and store it in this matrix or vector we call X. So just typing in all these times to failure in this matrix X. I'm then going to type in this expression here, and without going into too great a detail, this is doing what we call Markov chain Monte Carlo simulation. So we'll cover off on what that means in a little bit, but all we're going to do is use our test data or our field data, that's where our X sits, and we're going to ask it to create 100 samples of the parameters of our Weibull distributions, which could describe what's going on. So we'll just look at what that means very in the next few slides. So if this doesn't make a lot of sense, hopefully it will make a little bit of sense later, very soon. So when we run this function, what we get is a number of a series of pairs of numbers. So each pair represents the two parameters which define our Weibull distribution. The one on the left represents the scale parameter eta. The one on the right represents our shape parameter beta. And because I put 100 in that expression, we have 100 rows, which means we have in effect 100 different Weibull distributions based on our data. So if we take one, we can plot that on our probability plot and get this straight line here. Now, if we do that for the other 100, we get this entire set of Weibull distributions. And because it's Weibull probability plotting paper, each one creates a straight line. So you can see that we are now characterizing the uncertainty, because what we did with that first function was to create a bunch of Weibull distributions whose likelihood to occur is based on how well they describe the information we see. So the next part of nerding it up is to go back and use those parameters, those 100 parameters, to essentially create a bunch of sample points of our failure probability at 2 years. So when we do this, and here's the expression you can see on the screen right now, which uses the Weibull CDF function, we get these numbers here, and each one of these represents a sampled failure probability at 2 years. Now we'll look at what that means graphically right now. So what this little expression did was, at our warranty period of 2 years, work out the implied failure probability for each one of our Weibull distributions. And you can see that we have 100 samples of failure probability at 2 years. Why am I doing this? Because I can use these samples. These samples can be used to create, for example, a really simple histogram. Now, this histogram contains all the information we need to help us really understand the failure probability at 2 years in a very basic way. So if I take that histogram and now plot it on our warranty period failure probability, we get this smooth curve here. So this tells us what this correctly captures our understanding of the failure probability of our wireless modem router. This is how we summarize every bit of information we have regarding the question that our boss is asking us. But we are not there yet, because this is failure probability. This is not inherently giving us enough information to help us answer the question. So let's just say that we want to convert this to warranty costs. Well, not to say, we're going to actually do that. And we simply know that warranty costs is equal to our failure probability times $115. This will give you how much you would expect to pay per unit. And because we have 100 samples, here are our expected warranty costs. So each row contains a sampled warranty cost. Now, what that means is that instead of having a warranty period failure on the horizontal axis, we can now replace it with warranty costs per unit. So this represents our understanding of how much money we expect to pay per unit to cover warranty costs. But again, we're not there yet because we know our boss is actually interested in profit, and profit is equal to $10 minus the expected warranty cost for our wireless modem router. So this gives us another set of 100 numbers, which gives us our sampled profit. So we can go back to our histogram and plot these data points. And so it changes from a warranty cost per unit to profit per unit. Now we have all the information we can possibly squeeze out of our data analysis problem to answer our boss's question. So instead of using this histogram, I actually did this, but created a sample size of 100,000, so a huge number of samples. And because your computer's doing it and not you, it doesn't matter. It doesn't make it any more challenging for you. But by increasing the number of samples, we make this really smooth histogram, which eventually allows us to replace it with a PDF, which represents our understanding of the expected profit per unit. And using that histogram in the PDF, we can work out that, for example, there is a 40.73% chance of us losing money for this wireless modem router. The expected profit is 32 cents. Now, this correctly summarizes all the information you can possibly have to give to your boss. You cannot make it any easier you cannot make it process it any further, because your boss was all about profit. His decision was based on the profit. So as soon as we get our subjective understanding in terms of profit, we can go no further in terms of doing the analysis. However, we can pull different statistics from this risk profile with respect to decision to align with what your boss is most easily able to understand. Is it expected profit? Is it the probability of a loss? Whatever metric you need to communicate to your boss, this curve can give you. So before I move on, I can see there's a couple of questions in regard to first question I can see is today's webinar going to be available through recording? Absolutely, yes, it will be. All our webinars on accendoreliability.com are available for members to view in their own time afterwards. So yes, we'll be recording today's lesson, webinar. You'll be able to view it later on. But before I move on, I just like to open the floor to questions for what we have done before I throw a couple of questions back at you guys. Any questions what we've done so far? Thanks, Mark. And in regards to your comment, I know I had to nerd it up a little bit, but hopefully you can see all I had to do was type in 2 or 3 commands in MATLAB. I didn't have to create a very fancy program to make this happen. So the question I see is, what distribution is shown right now? Good question. This is no distribution. This is simply us working out this is something we created based on the problem. So not every probability distribution will be from the set of probability distributions you'll see in your textbooks. This is completely derived from the problem at hand, which was based on the percentage of things that you'd expect to fail at 2 years' time, at the warranty period of 2 years. So if we go back, we only typically use an off-the-shelf probability distribution if we're trying to fit a model. Now we use the Weibull distribution to model the reliability of our wireless modem router, but this histogram on the left-hand side comes from the precise interpretation of the problem at hand. It is the probability of us having our wireless modem router fail at 2 years into its life. So there is no model we're fitting to the data because we have the data. We've already created a model per se. We're now using that model to create sample data points to help us answer our question. And because we're doing that, we are creating our own probability distribution, but the real one, the right one. So this doesn't, although it has a bell curve, it doesn't mean it's a normal distribution. You see a lot of bell shapes in nature, but this probability distribution is got no name. We generated completely from our understanding of the process. And because we use sampling, Markov chain Monte Carlo sampling, we create the perfect probability distribution for our question. But that's a really good question. We're not trying to fit anything to it. We are creating our own with that sampling approach. Let's just see. You can see a couple of questions before they go. So the next question is, in practice, how do you modify the approach to include censoring using only failure data that will show negative bias? Really good question. Now, with censoring, you can still use the Markov chain Monte Carlo simulation approach. It's just that when I incorporate censoring and I use this slice sampler algorithm here, I need to change the line at the bottom to include not only observed data points, but censored data points, which is straightforward to do. It might be a conversation we should have after today's webinar, but it really is quite easy to do. And once you include it here in this line of code, all that censored data point will then influence the samples you get as an output of that approach. So you don't have to modify too much. And I see that, Mark, you don't have MATLAB, you use R. I know R has very similar coding language. It has very similar functions. So you should be able to do this in a heartbeat as well. More than happy to talk offline to get you there as well. Now, how little data could you use for the base data set? David, hold that question. It's a really good question. We're going to address it later on. So Mark, not everything is named. This is what the data supports. Do you mind just refining those questions or comments so I can understand the context you're talking about? An MCMC is nearly magic. In a way, it can be. So is the expected profit just the mean? Yes, the expected profit is the mean. So the mean is a really useful metric in terms of us being able to say that, hey, if we were to sell 1 billion units, then our profit we'd expect would be 32 cents. It's our expected return on investment. It is what would happen if you were able to run that experiment for an infinite number of times. Obviously, we can't do that, so we have to take into consideration the uncertainties each side as well. All right, so what we've covered so far. It's really simple. Hopefully, you think it's simple. It can incorporate a ton of different things as well, including censored data points. That's really easy to do. And once you do it, you don't have to make assumptions. You get the completely synthesized probability distribution to help you answer your question. And that's one of the reasons that commercial software often sucks, because of that. And because it's so simple, this is something I did really quickly last night, just to show you how easy it is to look at this problem from a different perspective. So what I did is I created a little video which shows our histogram, which represents our PDF of warranty failure probability for different warranty periods. So you're about to see a little video which shows the the expected warranty failure rate for a warranty period starting from 0 and going all the way up to 4 years. So if our warranty period is 0, we expect nothing to fail. So the failure probability is 0. If our warranty period is 1 day, sure, there's a chance of failure, but it's going to be very, very small. And this is all based on our data. So have a look at what you're about to see. There's a scale at the top, which shows, which has a little triangle moving from left to right, which shows you the warranty period that the histogram below is based on. And it's really simple. You can see that as the warranty period increases, our probability of failure in that warranty period also increases. And this is using essentially the same code that we just went through. It's just that it's evaluating it at different points, at different warranty period values. So you can really fine tune what the analysis is all about. So if your boss is saying, hey, 32 cents profit, that's not enough. We need to bring back our warranty period so that we have a higher profit margin. And you go, okay, well, let's have a look at this video here and let's find the histogram or the PDF of failure probability, which makes sense from a business perspective. So you can see how I've done this really quickly for our warranty period. So simple to do the same thing for expected profit as well. Now, this is actually, like I want to reinforce how simple this is, and you're all smart people, so if you're able to invest a little bit of time into understanding things like MATLAB or R, you can create your own data analysis approaches where you don't rely on commercial software. Now, beyond the fact that commercial software just focuses on giving you reliability metric outputs, there are a ton of assumptions that they make as well, which we don't talk about a lot in the industry. So for example, if I put these data points into commercial software, it will give me this 90% confidence region. If I say, please give me a 90% confidence region. Now, to answer those questions, like how much profit will I make, what's the risk profile, this 90% confidence region interval doesn't give you that beautiful PDF curve of warranty failure probability at 2 years, for example. You might, and I've seen this done before, you might have people who try and do a bunch of different confidence intervals to try and sort of create that probability distribution at 2 years, but that is archaic, it's time consuming and highly inaccurate as well. If we go back to what commercial software is doing, it is making a ton of assumptions. And if we use Markov chain Monte Carlo simulation, we'll realize that these dotted lines on our confidence area are the true confidence lines. So because there is a ton of assumptions which are based on the Fisher information matrix and lots of other things, we see that there is a difference between the true confidence region and the actual confidence region. But it gets much worse the less information you have. So if we only have a few data points, in this case we have 4 data points, this is the confidence area, confidence region, or 90% confidence region that software will give you. Now, who was it who asked about the number of data points? David, you asked about how many data points we need to have. Sorry, well, there is no answer for that, because the fewer data points you have, the more uncertainty you'll have in your failure probability at 2 years, and that will be borne out in your in that histogram we looked at. So we'll come back to that in a tick. But just before we leave this conversation, look at what the commercial software is doing with regards to this confidence region. You'll see that the confidence region is in some case going down as we move from left to right, and that's statistically impossible. You can't do that. You can't have an estimate on the CDF decreasing with respect to time. That's saying that we expect things to be more likely to work as they get older. That's just can't happen. This is what commercial software does with all the assumptions they make. And the actual confidence bounds on our 4 data points here are shown here in dotted lines. So coming back to your question, David, it doesn't really matter how many data points you have, because if you use Markov chain Monte Carlo simulation, the uncertainty that you introduce by having such little information will be borne out in that histogram we just looked at. So let's go back a few slides, and maybe in my next iteration of this webinar, I might include an example of that. If you only have 4 data points and a lot more uncertainty, sorry, this curve which we get from Markov chain Monte Carlo simulation might be a lot lower and a lot fatter. So the uncertainty in the warranty period that we get from having such little information will make this curve a lot less certain. It'll be a lot lower and a lot fatter. And that's still information that can inform the decision maker. Because if your wireless modem router has field data or test data, but only has 4 data points, and the reason it only has 4 data points is because it's so reliable that barely any of them fail during tests, that's a great thing. So you'll see a lower fat PDF, but to the right, where we're making tons more profit. So having fewer data points is not necessarily a bad thing. You have less information, but you often have fewer data points when your thing is more reliable. And using the Markov chain Monte Carlo simulation approach it will have that uncertainty incorporated into your risk or decision risk profile. So hopefully that answers the question. Seeing a couple more questions coming through. For the lower number of data points, are you using RRX or MLE? No. So maximum likelihood estimation in particular, that is the one that most software packages use. So I'm just using an example of how they use maximum likelihood estimation to get the line of best fit, and then they use the Fisher information matrix to create that confidence region. So MLE in particular is focused on the line of best fit, and they use the approximation of the Fisher information matrix. If you want to talk about that separately, feel free to email me to create the confidence bounds. So rank regression over X is another approach that we can use, but realistically, when we're talking about rank regression, we are not looking at the underlying likelihood of separate models, which is why MCMC wins every single time. Okay, so if you use MCMC, you never have to worry about these assumptions. You never have to worry about having not enough data to get an answer that you can, get an output that you can use to inform a decision. If you have little data, that will be incorporated into your decision risk profile. If there's still too much uncertainty in your decision risk profile for your decision maker, that's when you might need to go and get more data. But again, things that are more reliable tend to have less data because they don't fail as much, which is great. So less data is not necessarily the enemy to decision making. If you have only a little bit of data and the results aren't conclusive from the decision maker's perspective, then you do have a problem. Then you go and do more research or more testing, which means it comes back to the most important three things for reliability data analysis: decisions, decisions, decisions. They are the three most important things for data analysis. What is it that matters to your decision maker? In this case, we examined a decision where the decision maker was motivated by profit, and that's okay. So as soon as we knew he or she was motivated by profit, we worked out how reliability influenced profit. It is simply the failure probability multiplied by the warranty cost per unit. That's how much we lose. How much we gain is the net profit per unit. So the net profit per unit minus the net cost per unit gives us the answer our decision, or gives us the information or the metric that our decision maker will use to inform his or her decision to press play or not. So find out what metric matters to your decision maker before you move on. And don't use commercial software blindly. Commercial software is really good at solving 95% of your surface level inquiries when it comes to reliability engineering. But there are problems. Firstly, they make a ton of assumptions, so the confidence bounds aren't really confidence bounds. That becomes less of an issue if you have more data, obviously, but if you have less data, then the confidence bounds provided by your commercial software are typically quite off, and they tend to overstate the failure probability as well. That's the first issue. The second issue with commercial software is it spits out answers in terms of reliability performance. You're not interested in reliability performance for reliability performance's sake. You're interested in how much that reliability performance affects the value of your organization. You need to understand how much money that reliability characteristic will make or cost you. So the output of commercial software is still an input at best to a business decision. So if you're able to dissect the problem with a little bit more detail and use, you do have to nerd it up a little bit, but if you can teach yourself how to do Markov chain Monte Carlo simulation, you can really quickly get some very useful decision risk profiles, which allows a decision maker to make a completely informed decision. Now, those lines of code I showed in the lesson, obviously they're in the notes, but there are a couple of things you need to be aware of if you're going to use those equations more frequently moving forward. There are some tricks, there are some things you need to consider. Certainly outside the scope of today's webinar. If you want another webinar on how to do Markov chain Monte Carlo simulation for these simple reliability problems in a more detailed, more robust way, please let us know. You can easily do that in one of our webinar series. But hopefully you can see that if we do that, we get a really useful decision risk profile, which helps us understand what the decision maker needs to have moving forward. See a couple of answers. Yes, another detailed session will be awesome. All right, might have to get that locked away, Fred, on how to use Markov chain Monte Carlo simulation. But you guys need to work with me here, because now you know why Markov chain Monte Carlo simulation is awesome. But if I have a webinar titled Markov Chain Monte Carlo Simulation, that's going to throw a lot of people away. So let's make sure that you help us out in terms of spreading the word with respect to why Markov Chain Monte Carlo Simulation is not something to be scared of. It's not something that slows things down. It is an awesome tool that really helps you as a reliability engineer become valuable to a decision maker. And when you become valuable to a decision maker, they start to listen to you, which helps everyone, especially yourself. Okay, so I see a couple of questions. How can we reach you? My contact details are on accendoreliability.com. Feel free to reach out there. My bio is there as well. Please reach out. If I can see a ton of responses for MCMC webinars, that's cool. I think we're going to have to lock that one in, Fred. That's a done deal. But if you want to reach out to me, my contact details, my email address is on the accendoreliability.com website. So I'll look forward to future correspondence moving forward. And that's it. Are there any questions beyond those that have already been asked on what this is all about? I do need to stress, I picked one decision, or one example decision, I should say. So it's really easy to change what we did to suit any other decision, but I picked one example today. It's not the only decision we can use this approach for, obviously, but just be aware that you need to have the analysis suit your decision and not the other way around. Any more questions? Okay, with the increase in number of failures, how sensitive is MCMC? In terms of how sensitive it is, I don't think that's actually, there's no premise for that question, and just bear with me, because if you have less information, what Markov Chain Monte Carlo Simulation does is incorporate the uncertainty in the samples. So essentially, those hundreds of lines of Weibull distributions you saw on the screen, if you have less information, I'll pull that slide up. Not that one. So here is those hundreds of lines that our Markov Chain Monte Carlo Simulation spat out at us. If you have fewer data points, those lines will be less dense. They'll be more spread out to incorporate the lack of information you have. And when they're spread out, then that will then influence the warranty failure probability. Those estimates will also be spread out, which then propagates through your entire decision-making process, and that the curve we got at the end will be lower and fatter to reflect the fact that we don't have as much information. So MCMC is not sensitive per se because it accurately represents how much information you have. It is what it is. There's no information that it requires. There's no information threshold below which it won't work. It will just incorporate the uncertainty in the outputs, which is one of the beauties of MCMC. There's no assumptions, there's no inaccuracies. It will capture the lack of information. Does that answer your question? I suppose in the next iteration of this webinar, I might actually compare this set of Weibull distribution lines with another set generated from data set with less data points, so you can actually see the effect it has, that fewer data points has on these lines being more spread out, and how that goes all the way through to the end. So if we have fewer data points, we'll have less information, so that 100 samples of reliability at 2 years or failure probability at 2 years will be more spread out, which then goes through and informs the decision maker. Any more questions? Just wait one more minute to allow the chance that someone's typing in a question/novel so it can come through. But if not, we'll be calling it quits fairly soon. So I can see a question from a Maximilian. The $0.32 is basically the expected monetary value. What was the mean of the model's output? That was the mean. So 32 cents was the expected value, which is the mean. So the mean is what you will see if you run the same experiment an infinite number of times. So that's how we get the expected value. In fact, the mean is often called the expectation or the expected value in terms of probability and statistics. Cool, thank you, David. Another 4 minutes on the clock if people need to sit back and think of a probing question, which might stump me, hopefully. Thank you, Evan. Much appreciated. Can you place confidence on the mean? Yes, you can, David. Absolutely, you can. In this case, we're not so interested in confidence on the mean because we don't use that mean value to inform a decision per se, because we're actually interested in the variation around the mean as well when it comes to profit. So that would be the expected value, but the sort of distribution around it means that, hey, when you run your experiment, boss, there's a 40% chance you won't make a profit. But if you're to run this production process in 1,000 different companies and you're all producing wireless modem routers for the same process, you know, as a rule, you run that experiment enough times, all the different divisions manufacturing the same wireless modem router would expect to, on average, make 32 cents per unit. So it's the mean is an important part of the decision, but in terms of confidence on the mean, we're more interested in the confidence on the profit itself. A lot of organizations like having a confidence on the mean because they're looking at it from the perspective of testing, and they use that mean to inform availability and logistics and sparing models. That's not what we're doing here. We're doing a much simpler, much more pure relationship between the information we have and the metric that matters. Thank you for your feedback, team. Okay, so request for the following session, if possible, with R. All right, I'll see what I can do. I've been brought up on MATLAB and I've used R. My go-to thing is MATLAB, but hey, it's all about you guys, so we'll see what we can do for our webinar moving forward. I do know that MATLAB is a little bit better at creating those nice little videos. So even if I do use R, I might revert to MATLAB to actually illustrate some of the more, some of the cooler functions as well. But I take your point. No, it's not. R is a very, very powerful programming language, and it's free, which makes it really cool. All right, 1 more minute. So if I do that MCMC webinar, you got to help me. You got to help me promote that one, because unless you've seen a webinar like this, there's a chance that people won't appreciate what MCMC is all about, Markov chain Monte Carlo simulation. I'll make it as simple as possible. If it's not simple, it's not useful. So we'll use a similar decision, hopefully, and try and really get to the heart of how we use Markov chain Monte Carlo simulation. But hey, what it's worth, give us a hand to try and generate some buzz on what could be a pretty boring title to a webinar moving forward. So we're coming up to the hour. So I think we might wrap things up there. Again, hey team, thank you very much for your time. It's great reaching out to you guys and having this conversation. It's always good to brush up on our skills at this end. You can contact me through accendoreliability.com. If you can't find my email address for whatever reason, the comments section of this webinar is something that will automatically be forwarded to me as well. So you can fairly easily, hopefully, find me, get my contact details, or otherwise reach out. But beyond that, hey, enjoy the rest of your day, and looking forward to talking again soon.